Thanks very much, Chris, and really thanks to the organizers for what has been a really stimulating, great program today. I really enjoyed it. Thanks also for hanging out for the last session of the day. It's really a real pleasure of mine. It's an honor of mine, really, to be here with you today. Looking forward to sharing a bit of my take on machines plus media, in particular about how I think we can make AI, automation, and algorithms work better for journalism. So again, professor of communication studies at Northwestern. I direct a research lab there, the computational journalism lab, where we design, build, and study all kinds of things related to computational, algorithmic, and automated production and dissemination of news information. So I'm not sure which clicker is going to work here. There we go. So here's the book that Chris mentioned. I've actually spent the better part of the last two and a half years working on this book. It'll be out in a couple of weeks, so I hope you'll take a look and let me know what you think. Really, this book covers a lot of terrain that I think is relevant to this conference that has come up in various ways over the course of the day. Everything from editorial data mining, so using algorithms and automation to find new and discover new news stories. Automated content production, so these are things like automated writing systems that are used to write everything from finance to sports stories. Social bots, so what happens to automated content production when we put a social face on it and it starts interacting with people on social media platforms. Things like algorithms and distribution, so how can we optimize the dissemination of content on platforms algorithmically? How can we optimize the writing of content so it maximally appeals to people? And then finally kind of turning things around and thinking a lot about algorithmic accountability reporting. And with the growth of algorithms in society, thinking about how journalists can start scrutinizing these systems to understand the bias, the power, the influence of these systems in society. So let's get this out of the way here. AI is probably at a pinnacle of hype, or wait, no, now it's at a pinnacle of hype. We've got it animating fully. I think we've seen a lot of really exciting advances in technology presented at this conference today. Certainly, fully automated news production is tantalizing without a doubt. It's even in the title of my book. And there are some really genuinely impressive and helpful applications of AI in news production that we should celebrate. It can enhance investigative journalism. We can use data mining to enhance the scale and the scope of important journalistic investigations. We can create new interactive media like news bots, which are helping to engage people and disseminate information online. We can optimize content on platforms, not only to increase the audience, but also to make sure that content finds the right audience for that content. And generally, we can sort of enhance the scale, the speed, the efficiency, the breadth, and the personalizability of content. But behind the curtain, I think we also need to understand the designers, the editors, the reporters, the data scientists, the engineers that are contributing to the appearance of intelligence in these systems. And so what I kind of want to focus on for the rest of my talk here today are at least, I think, some of the issues that surface when we fully consider the people in the process of AI in journalism. So try to cut through some of the hype related to AI. And, really, I kind of want to convince you that when we talk about AI in journalism, really what we should be talking about is human-centered AI in journalism. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of the themes in my book. In particular, I want to talk about human values in technology and how journalistic values get built into these AI systems. I want to talk about how humans and algorithms are increasingly being hybridized. We heard about this even going back to the first session this morning. And I want to talk about how these themes kind of lead to some considerations when thinking about designing, engineering, and deploying these systems. So the two main themes of the book that I have coming out are here. This idea of human values in technology and this idea of hybridization. So All technologies, including, but I think especially AI technologies, embed and encode human values. These reflect choices like what data was used to train the system, how algorithms are parameterized, how defaults are chosen, what inputs a system pays attention to, and indeed whether or not something is quantified at all by the system. Artificial intelligence systems are tools. I think it's important to frame them that way, and they're built by people with human means to serve human means and ends. I think that makes them important political actors, right? We need to consider the political valence of these tools. They reflect the values that designers and developers build into them. I think this suggests a really interesting opportunity for journalists, for news organizations to really become aware of and start exercising their ability to embed their own organizational, institutional, and professional values into these technologies that are then driving automated news production. If it's not going to be journalistic values and the sort of the journalistic ethos and ideology, then alternative values from non-editorial stakeholders or from non-journalistic media companies will fill that void. So I think it's kind of interesting to start thinking about AI as a new medium. It's a medium which journalists can use to express their own and exercise their own ethical and normative values through the code that they implement into these systems. So I would urge journalists to kind of step up and start thinking of themselves as AI designers if they really kind of want to own the future of algorithmic news media. The second sort of theme that I want to talk about relates to this idea of hybridization. So every wave of technology, whether it's telephony, photography, or just copy machines, has somehow changed the nature of roles and tasks and workflows in the newsroom. AI is no different here, right? It's also technology that is and will continue to change the nature of news work. It will often complement, but rarely fully substitute for a trained journalist. Some economists have estimated that only about 15% of a reporter's time and only maybe 9% of an editor's time could be automated using current levels of AI technology. Humans still have an edge over non-Hollywood AI in a couple of key areas, complex communication and expert thinking. Reporting, listening, responding and pushing back, negotiating with sources, and then having the creativity to put it all together or to know when to pivot in a different direction. These are all indispensable journalistic tasks that AI is nowhere near being able to really substitute for. So, but it is worth underlining that AI can often augment people in these various tasks. More often than not, what I found in my research is that AI technologies actually create new types of work, right? So things like configuring, parameterizing, updating knowledge bases, producing data, writing templates that drive the automation. These are all new forms of work, new tasks that need to be done. So far from destroying jobs in journalism, AI appears to be creating them. So let me give you some examples here to help illustrate some of these points. And I want to kind of drill into this first point about news values and offer you an example of why I think the translation of news values into code is something that I think we need to be more cognizant of and think about more carefully. So this is a screenshot from a system called ClaimBuster. It's a couple of years old now. It's a project out of the University of Texas at Arlington. What ClaimBuster does is it's a machine-learned system that can read through a text that you tell it to look at, and it grades each sentence based on this check-worthiness score. So from 0 to 1, 1 being more check-worthy. And the idea is that fact-checkers would use this tool to monitor statements that are being made in the world, and then select the subset of statements that are sort of the most interesting or the most check-worthy to pay attention to. By orienting attention and reducing the cost of finding certain types of claims, though, I think we need to be careful about how this is kind of shaping attention. So let me tell you a little bit about some of the evaluations of ClaimBuster. In the graph that you're seeing here, this is an evaluation that compared the topic of claims identified by the algorithm to the topic of claims manually selected for fact-checking by CNN and PolitiFact. These findings showed that ClaimBuster identified more claims about the economy and fewer claims about social issues. And so if reporters were to rely solely on this tool for directing their attention for fact-checking, this could decrease attention given to social issues, and that may be an outcome that that is sort of undesirable from a public interest standpoint. Another evaluation of ClaimBuster was actually done on all the transcripts from the 2016 U.S. presidential debates, and that evaluation showed that Donald Trump had fewer check-worthy claims identified by the system than Clinton did. Now, we know based on how the algorithm is built and how it was evaluated that the system is kind of cued in and heavily weights the presence of numbers and figures in claims in sort of driving its score. And this kind of starts to suggest that Trump's rhetoric and his mode of communication may have made his statements less susceptible to getting picked up by the algorithm. So as these types of automated fact-spotting systems come into wider use and are more adopted, I think it's kind of an important question will be to kind of assess how they impact the coverage of various types of stories, of various claims, of events, of modes of political rhetoric. And I think journalists are going to need to become more cognizant of the ways that these algorithms can orient their attention or divert their attention in characteristic ways, and then be ready to fill in the gaps where the algorithms are sort of biasing away from certain things. The sort of deeper idea here relates to this idea of algorithmic newsworthiness. And it's not just fact-spotting systems, I should add, right? There's an increasing number of tools that are being used in computational news discovery within newsrooms, as well as a variety of algorithms which shape kind of the distribution of news via various channels online. And again, these approaches raise interesting questions about, how algorithms come to embed evaluative criteria like what is newsworthy? How are we going to direct attention either in the newsroom or of consumers toward different pieces of news? We know that there's what's selected to become a news item is contingent on a range of individual, organizational, social, cultural, technical forces. It has to fit with the editorial focus of the outlet. It has to fit with audience expectations. And newsworthiness is not intrinsic to an event. It's very much an interpretive activity on the part of a journalist to decide if something is going to become news. Because I know we have some data scientists in the room too, I just also want to add that this is a key issue for data scientists working on and building these systems. Just because you can define a metric, because you have the data for it, or you can implement something in code that you think corresponds to some measure of interestingness, doesn't mean that that's going to be a metric that is interesting to journalists or that aligns with some notion of newsworthiness in journalism. I think this all kind of starts to suggest an interesting opportunity for future systems to be explicitly designed to help editors configure these news discovery systems, to be able to adjust the news values that are embedded into these systems. And then also to be able to track the shape of the leads produced by these systems, right? To know how their reporters have configured the sort of the newsworthiness knobs on these systems. So we might see a future where editors might have to kind of set the acceptable bounds of the algorithms in shaping the news leads that come into the newsroom. So let me also offer you an example that will ground some of what I'm about to say about hybridization in news work. So this idea, again, of blending AI and algorithms and humans together in production. So the RADAR project, which stands for Reporters and Data and Robots, was born out of a collaboration between the UK Press Association and a startup called Urbs Media in London. With a team of just 5 data reporters and 2 editors, it produces an average of about 8,000 local stories every month across the UK. Its stories are run by various local media outlets that subscribe to a wire service that RADAR provides. And one of those stories is shown here just to give you a flavor for what that looks like. Now, to produce these localized stories, Radar uses freely available government data. Hey, thanks, government. They invested a lot of money to collect that data. Those data sets are tabulated by geographic area, and then each reporter develops about 2 story ideas per week into data-driven templates, which include fragments of text, data-driven if-then-else rules, so kind of some logic, and then those rules are then used to translate bits of the text into location-specific text fragments. So the core structure of the stories might be somewhat similar across different versions, but the details will be locally tailored algorithmically. So the data journalists at Radar are tasked with first figuring out various angles and storylines for the data, and then they actually do some reporting, right? They call up people, they gather national context, and they write all of that information up into this template with a basic story structure. And then the automation is kind of used as a production assistant to adapt some of the text in the templates to a local level. So the key takeaway here is that automation is really being used to augment or to lever up human effort in the system. So I also wanted to show you a screenshot of this. This is a tool called Aria Studio. Radar uses this tool actually as the tool for template writing. It gives you a hint at what hybridization actually looks like in practice. In reality, it's just a more complex word processing tool. I mean, you can think of it as a kind of an alien word processor that lets the author write fragments of text controlled by data-driven if-then-else rules, and some linguistic functions are built in there. And there's some machine learning here and there that can kind of be built into the templates as well. But I think what's really kind of interesting about this and the Radar story is that advances like we're seeing in automated writing in industry now are really kind of coming more as a result of user interface advances, right? It's how do we build a tool that allows a journalist to be more effective in levering up their ability to write these templates. So things like automated document planning and micro-planning stages of natural language generation, those are very complex. They demand a fair amount of both engineering and domain knowledge. But I think what these interfaces do that's quite interesting is that they offload the most complex aspects of authoring the most complex aspects of document planning, I would say, get offloaded to a human writer who then authors this kind of meta document of rules and text fragments. So the really hard decisions about what becomes a story, about how to logically structure that story into a document is done by people. And then the automation is really just a helper. It's just doing minor adaptations to localize these stories. So kind of stepping back a bit to look at this theme of hybridization a little bit more, again, I think these examples really kind of demonstrate this idea of how automation is used in concert with human effort. I think in that hybridization of work, again, more often than not, these AI technologies are actually creating new types of work related to updating, tweaking, validating, maintaining, and overseeing these systems. A lot of this work is relatively routine, making sure that data streams are updated, editing databases or spreadsheets to reflect new details, or tweaking any of the rule sets that are used to drive some of these templates. Certainly, things like supervision are also important to continue to have people in the loop. Right, automation editors are needed to assess the quality of the content produced. People need to be available to post corrections if the automation produces errors. Engineers might need to be involved in figuring out what caused errors and to ensuring that they're not repeated next time. And generally, I think people will need to sort of keep an eye on the big picture of these systems, right? We need people involved to know when can we use automation, or when do we need to take this piece of automation out of operation, or when do we need to kind of redevelop the system to make it more adaptable over time. In general, I think we're going to see newsroom skills, tasks, and even jobs evolve with respect to automated content production. Sort of given the use of template-driven approaches to automated content, I think writing is one of the areas where the craft is already evolving. Template writers need to learn how to sort of approach a story with an understanding of what the available data could say, and sort of imagine how that data could be adapted in different ways. I don't see, in terms of implications for labor, I don't see automation leading to any kind of massive unemployment in journalism. I think issues with business models are probably far more to blame for that. Nonetheless, this is going to have some implications for the labor force, as we also heard earlier in the day from various speakers. This could have implications for reskilling journalists, for instance, and that could include learning how to write these templates. It could include learning how to do some basic coding and some how to encode logic into these templates and so on. And I think it's also fair to say that a lot of these roles are going to require editorial thinking. It's not necessarily going to be fully technical people who are doing all of these roles. We need people who are trained in journalism, who understand how to write in a journalistic style, but who also have these more kind of data-oriented skills to work with these tools. Finally, I just kind of want to add that I think there's a lot of meaningful research to do in this space to understand the roles and the tasks of journalists in these hybrid workflows, and to study the ways in which journalists and AI can kind of effectively interact and collaborate. And I also think it's really important to think about kind of the bigger picture, concerns around autonomy and agency and the ergonomics of labor. We want to be careful to build these hybrid systems to be respectful of people and to make sure that these new hybrid jobs in journalism are good jobs and not just, oh, the algorithm told me to do this and now I have to, kind of do this grunt work for the algorithm. So maintaining sort of human control in these systems. So just in wrapping up, I know I'm out of time here. I just kind of want to remind everyone that I think it does ultimately come back to people. What animates algorithms are the people who design and develop, operate, and manage these systems. And so I think a human-centered future of algorithmic media really means that the people in this room have agency and responsibility for how these systems come to influence the news that we all consume. So rather than taking a tech-first approach to these questions, I would urge us all to kind of learn from the almost 40-year history of human-computer interaction to think through how we can ensure these systems are really built to support people. So thank you, and I will turn it over to Meredith.